What is your freedom worth to you? Each of our guests had a light bulb moment. They longed to live rather than merely exist. They smashed through their fears and programmed minds, trusting themselves, their faith, and their survival instincts, leaving the guilt, fear, oppression, and drudgery of their past for a brighter future. They took a brave and courageous step into freedom. This is their story of how they got a life. Welcome to Get a Life Podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
I'm here tonight with Gilly, and Ross will be joining us very shortly. And our special guest tonight is Dean Wheeler. Good evening, Dean. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So Dean is, like the rest of us, an ex-member of the PBCC, but Dean has a rather unusual story in that he wasn't born into the PBCC, were you, Dean? So maybe you could just start off by telling us your story.
I think we need to start in the beginning. And I suppose by starting in the beginning, I would say that as I first started, kind of, if I go back as far as I can in life, I suppose I can remember, being a young child, and mum kind of like, I don't know, we were friends with the neighbours, and as I got a bit older, I could see my dad was brethren orientated, and would talk about the brethren and worked very hard. And my mum was busy leaving him, basically, due to him wanting to go back to the brethren, I believe. Obviously, my dad was 34, I think, when he married her, aged 19 or 18.
Yeah, so your parents met and married in the brethren.
They met and married in the brethren. Okay?
And then they left before you were born.
They were kicked out and in two minds of whether to leave. I think my dad, over the years, I've spoken, spoke to my, and she would say to me, your dad tried to leave but couldn't, and I wanted out of there. She told me that, at an early age. And she had a boyfriend by the time I was 6-7 years old. I was going swimming with her and Bob, who became her husband, and my brothers as well, and I didn't really take much notice of this, but one day my dad and Bob had an argument, blah, blah, blah. Then it became a bit more serious about the divorce. I'm going 8-9 years old now. And my dad, I remember Charles Dunn and Chris Brown coming to my house and giving me a Bible when I was like 9 or something, getting this gold leaf thing to look at. And the marriage was definitely over then. My dad moved into the attic, and he was working full time. He would work hard. My mum was out and about. She's still young, crumbs. And I suppose around that time, she had a TV in her room. I'd watch TV on her TV. But more than anything, I was quite free, and my dad was working up there. My mum was busy. I was out on a bike, and I was meeting the kids in the neighbourhood. We were from, dare I say it, not being pretentious, quite a good neighbourhood as well. We weren't in the ghetto here, We talk about Reigate. So you meet the kids, and I was very free. As a little kid, I was extremely free. I'm talking about when I look back on my childhood, and it's literally full of riding bikes, friends, trying to work this a bit. You just came in, and my dad, he was so busy, and if he was getting, sometimes I'd come home from he'd be on his knees, sort of praying or something like that, But so it's pretty chaotic, sort of like those years. And then it came to a divorce, and my mum brought a tiny little 14th century cottage and had it all done up, which and Bob's divorce was going through. Bearing in mind he was a married man as well, with young children. They got together, and then, but as you can think, I'm 8 or 9 now. Now we're going on to 9 and 10. They're getting divorced. And I remember thinking, don't leave him with my dad. You know what I mean? Not that I don't love him or anything. It's just like I'm more into my mum's. In those years, as well as what I've just said, me and my mum and my brother, we went to a running club. Went to a running club. We used to go and watch athletics. Things like there was this social scene going on, which my dad wanted nothing to do with as well. He just, he could have met some nice people. Good people. So, this is a bit about my life when I'm younger. So eventually, I'm only 11, I think, and my dad, they've split up. My dad's got a house, my mum's moved away. Dad's got me. I'm just, and at this stage of my life, I'm really paying no notice. My dad's working so hard that, I'd get up in the morning, I wouldn't necessarily see him. I'd come home, wouldn't necessarily see him. I didn't particularly want to see him either. Not that, no love, just generally, dad's dad. Didn't have a real close one. Although we did. I'll talk about that. But very busy. And then all of a sudden, I came home, just joined secondary school. And I've come in, I think it's Tuesday, I can't remember what, Tuesday evening, and he said to me, right, Dean, I've got something to tell you, because I literally would come home, get my bike, go and hang out with friends. And I had a lot of friends. And back in my era was more the era, these days all your friends online, you play. But this era of mine, being 50, was the era of literally all the kids finishing school and going out and meeting on their bikes and hanging around till it got dark and stuff. I was really in that culture. So when my dad came and said, we're going to the Brethren, I knew who the Brethren were. And, they were obviously considered as a child, considered pretty weird. They dressed pretty weird, obviously, no one knew them really. And I have memories of being a kid, being on our bikes, being outside the Brethren meeting room, going round and round in circles on our bikes, and Brethren people, like the girls, knew who I was, so they were kind of smiling at me and things like that. And my friends were like, "Do you know them?" And I didn't know them.
So when you were growing up as a kid with your mum, did you have much awareness of who these people were? Did you not, or did you really understand much about them?
My dad was much more Victorian. His side of the family were quite Victorian. My grandmother, and they all left over at Aberdeen. All my dad's side of the family, they all left, and they absolutely wanted nothing to do with the Brethren. They were open Brethren, and my grandmother looked like, if you were to if someone said draw a grandmother, my grandmother looked like an artist had drawn a grandmother. She was really quite something.
Yeah.
But I thought, personally, they were quite Victorian and quite mad, I think, as well. And I think my granddad didn't get, but she was lovely. And I saw quite a lot of my dad's side of the family, but not one of my dad's side of the family. They all left the Brethren, all of them. My dad, I can remember there being religious bickering. There's something going on that was serious. They were arguing, and I'm really young here, and I can remember they were arguing. Anyway, I think I know what that was about now. And my dad was quite philosophical. Like, if you spoke to my dad, so my dad would really go into it with scriptures and get really quite passionate about talking about scriptures, and you should read this and you should read that. And I wasn't having a bar of it, really. I was free on another level. Just I couldn't take that on board, really. This God thing you need to believe in when life's just out round the corner, you know. Like, and my dad wasn't a particularly strict man either. I know other brethren, people have got stories of incredibly strict parents. My dad wasn't powerful like that. He was, you know, yeah. I mean, he what I got away with, if I'd had if my dad had been a real bastard, you know, he would have just tanned my arse, and just said, "You are not going." In a way, yeah, I continued to do what I wanted to do, which was just hang out with pals, basically. And I didn't stop doing that even when I joined the Brethren. But I just continued to. I knew I know I'm in this place. They brought me in on a meeting night. I remember actually, I didn't cry that much as a kid, but I did cry when my dad said, "We're going to the Brethren Church," and I'm like, "What?"
Was that one evening then? It was
just one evening. I didn't see that coming. I don't know. Yeah, I'm too young still.
Yeah.
We're going to the Brethren Church. I mean, what? You know, dawning on me, we're joining like the Brethren Church, and for me, that's really bad. You know, for my brother Andrew, it's like brilliant. My brother Andrew is always his father's son.
And how old would he have been at the time? You were about 11 at this time. So he would have been... Sorry?
About 15. 16,
a little bit older than you. Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin was 1 year younger. But Andrew is always really taken in by, like, just generally religion, God and Jesus, you know. It's just, you know, because that's kind of the thing with me. Like, what I've learned in life is my brother's obsession with religion. Like when he was only 15 years old, and like how like mentally was about it all, you know. It was quite freaky, and he was highly intelligent actually, because I didn't do very well at school. Not I was immature for one in my reports, and I wasn't paying attention, so I don't know really. There's loads to say, but Andrew, my eldest brother, was set one for maths and could help the maths teacher. He also was very clever with computers, and he knew all about computers. And again, at school, he was helping the teacher at school with all that stuff. So, highly intelligent guy, I believe. I haven't seen him for a long time, and he's very heavy. He's very like it's that. When you're rigid, you almost like do some yoga, do some stretches. No.
Yeah. So your dad took all three of you boys into the Brethren at those ages. Is that what happened? Yeah.
I was horrified. I said to my dad, he sat us down and said we're getting divorced, and I just thought, I knew my dad's life kind of meant, like, I knew my mum's life was fun. Her life was fun. I mean, my mum, they were partying, they were drinking, they were earning good money. It was fun. And my dad's life was anything but fun, seriously. But both my older brothers, they didn't want any. They both said to my mum, "No, we're cutting you off," sort of thing. So this is before I've joined the Brethren. Both of my brothers have said, one quite sternly and one really quite, tearfully. I remember that. And that's before we joined the Brethren. Probably not long before, obviously weeks or months. It was when we moved and the house split. But yeah. So but they both said first visit we all went to see my mum, and Andrew and Kevin both said no, we're not doing this. And I was like, well, I don't think I even thought about it that much. I just thought them two are mental, What's the problem? But, they like music. They sort of hang out and drink wine and blah, blah, blah. So that was that. Some of that was quite. Bob, but the guy that married my mum, before we got married, he had some houses down in France in the Dordogne. And my dad and his wife, I remember we went on holiday, a load of us. And Bob, who my mum had, they had a young family, two young families, they obviously fell in love. Which they did, but there was this holiday. So my dad went over to the Dordogne, and probably didn't blend well with these guys. Were like they were young, and Bob was a surveyor. I think one of the guys that was out there was an architect, sort of carrying on. Young people doing well when the brethren's not about like that lifestyle at all, is it? But,
well, it wasn't back then. I think it probably is now, but they say. But I agree with you back then.
The wealth thing, which I'm learning about, I can't help but keep learning a bit about the brethren. But I must admit, this kind of Bruce Hurl's money thing, and whiskey thing, I don't remember the whiskey being like a huge problem around Red and Rye. I'm not going to say the whiskey thing is quite a big deal, don't they?
The alcohol is quite a big deal, they say, don't they? So what actually happened then when your dad said we're going back to the Brethren with you boys, and then they got divorced? Then did you stay in the Brethren for a few years? What sort of happened? And you?
Oh no, hang on. Let's get this round the right way. So they got divorced, moved into, and then my dad had us three boys. My mum was living in a little cottage thing, which she wasn't with.
So your dad kept the three of you at that point.
He got custody of all three of us.
Right. So do you know how he got custody? That's quite interesting because it's unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think my mum. I think my mum kind of what with the Brethren thing. I think she just saw an escape there. And wasn't made a deal. Yeah, you take the boys. I'm too busy.
And your mum, she was born into the Brethren, wasn't she? But left.
Born into the Brethren.
Yeah. Okay.
I can tell you more about her. She was very keen to work early.
Yeah.
She got working. She wanted to do something. There wasn't an ounce of Brethren in her. From what I remember, at the age, there was nothing about her with like a Brethren lady. She was she wasn't particularly wild. She was pretty conservative. Loved the Queen.
So how did it feel having? I'm thinking this would have been what, early 80s when you joined. I'm just trying to think. You said you. So how did it feel having had a relatively free, normal childhood to suddenly go into the restrictions that were there at the time?
The restrictions weren't actually mine.
No,
I didn't feel that I had a bit of rebellion in me, and I kind of like, you've brought me here, and this is the truth actually. So you've brought me here almost against my will, but.
I see.
When I walked into that room, I didn't hold that attitude. This is more to the point. 11 years old, you walk into a meeting room. You don't know. You know about 10 of them, maybe. And obviously a few from school. And then you just how many people would have been invited? What, a couple of hundred, wouldn't they?
Probably around that
time. A few hundred people. So and that's it. We're back in the room. We sit down looking at all these people, and everyone's looking at me. Everyone I look at smiles at me. Everyone I look at then I finish that meeting, and then I'm as happy as Larry outside and chatting with a load of kids. A load of kids, and they all seemed pretty cool. I didn't know they were so. And then you go back, and then basically my dad's back in the Brethren. We're in. I didn't see that coming. So then you're going. All I'd say is that my dad couldn't stop me doing. I wouldn't have it. I'd come home from school. I missed a lot of meetings. I'd just come home from school and go out on my bike, and I wasn't having it. I wasn't like. But more about the brethren. The brethren thing completely freaked me out. I mean, I was that you know, I it did completely freak me out. Really, like, you know, prayer meetings, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to church all the time. And all I know is that I didn't want that. But when you join, you meet all these people.
Yeah. So just to explain, Dean, if I can just explain for the viewers perhaps that don't know the brethren, you would have gone from a childhood that was free in the evenings, school during the day and so on, to a life where you had a meeting every evening and on Saturday morning and 5 or 6 times on a Sunday.
They were trying to sell me this lifestyle,
Yeah, just to explain to people that don't perhaps understand the contrast if they don't,
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not only that, and then I go in and I've had my life and I am who I am, and I'm a show off, especially as a kid, you know, like I did this, I did that, or, you know, you meet these kids, they're 11 years old or they're 12 years old, and I immediately met Charles Dunn's boys straight away, and, like, worked out that they're all, like, been taken away from, like, Charles and Pansy. And learning about that, not really, and then going to Alan Lyons' house, and that's where they were living, and all his family was split up, and that was my dad's priest that used to visit him. So that was quite something, and then like their mum having a massive breakdown, like in front of like the whole. She stayed out for a few years, and then she came back. She was pale as a sheet, and she looked absolutely full of fear, and she kind of screamed, and like head went back, and she was a completely broken woman. I think they'd taken her away from Charles Dunn, and I don't know what happened there, but that's kind of learning about that side of the brethren. Like, this is what's going on here, then, you know.
So what you're referring to is the sort of when something happens to a family, either somebody's unwell or leaves the brethren, the younger children will go and live with other brethren's families, and a lot of people have said that on the podcast. And did you find that sort of a bit odd coming to that? Because for us being brought up with it, it was our normal as children, wasn't it?
Yeah, I found that, I kind of learned that, wow, how bizarre is that?
Yeah.
It's hard to explain to you how much, like, I would just, like I say, I was observing them, and I never felt like the people you've like had podcasts on before, they've really grown up in it, and they've really like, and I most definitely did not, but I still got taken in at age 11. I was given priestly visits, like long priestly visits, where all I can remember is the guy just. Mr. Greenaway, well, about once every 3/4 of an hour would just say, "Do you take Lord Jesus Christ as your Saviour?" Blah blah blah. And at age 14, 15, I was just thinking, "Get me out of here!" Well, what is this? Yeah, just don't want to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it instills a fear in you, I think. I mean, I found myself later on in life really like I see it. I don't see it as a waste of time now, but I can see how that affects your thought process, having all that drum. It depends on where you want to come out, but it does upset your thought process when you're trying to, like me. I think it all hit me when I was 18, 19. You know what college is like, and started getting into music and mild drugs and things, and really thinking. Like, I realise that now, that I was thinking, and I kind of ended up, you know, becoming quite ill. I would have said I sort of developed a form of psychosis. where I sort of believe in, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, I've gone up a couple of years now, and I've been really enjoying music, for instance, you know, like Fleetwood Mac, and discovering music I hadn't heard before, and really taking it massively seriously. The brethren wouldn't allow music, and really overthinking it. Like the brethren, you know, you can be in a family in the brethren, you can listen to the Beatles, and you might end up shut up or something for 6 months of your life.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, what? And I'm listening to all this new music, I'm getting high, you know, and things actually went from bad to worse, and I had a bad trip. I say it wasn't a bad trip, but I felt that strings got cut off my fingers, and then I came round. I went home, and my parents found me, and they sounded like demons. And I was looking out the window, and the world was cartoon. It was coming to a stop, and I thought it was the rapture. And then I opened the Bible, and I'm having a crazy trip. I've done something I shouldn't have done, which the Beatles did, you know. Yeah. I'm having quite a seriously hard time, really quite seriously, and it resulted in me being that. What that did to me, kind of like these something of grandeur. When I felt like I was getting picked up, I felt it was really kind of like almost Messiah-like, you know. And then I'm doing this trip, and I'm like, freaky things are happening. And I remember I came out of it the next day, and I was just like what happened last night? Oh, the rapture.
And that's what you thought?
No, yeah, sort of thing. And then it just, and then I really struggled with my mental health, really quite seriously, I would have said, for a good year or more, but really quite bad, resulting in a sort of psychotic kind of breakdown where I got really high, and like not with any substances or anything, and started behaving really sort of weirdly around town, and like too much energy and very, very thin. I went really completely bonkers for a little while there, and ended up in a nut house, mental hospital institution. They locked me up as well for about two months, I suppose. They locked me up. When I think back, I was a young guy there. I was in cloud cuckoo land with it all, you know. And I realised, if I say anything about it now, it's kind of a God religion overload, which had manifested itself in my brain. And it's not where I feel good to say that I kind of have survived that, but it was messy at times, you know. That was definitely messy at times. I was scared to live. I was scared to live in daylight.
About that time, were you about 18?
Oh,
19?
18, 19, yeah.
So you'd been in the Brethren for what, 7-8 years? That kind of time frame.
Yeah, I joined
when you became unwell.
And I joined a gang of bricklayers as well, and I kind of left the Brethren and joined this lovely in a way. But you know, you go from that lifestyle, and then they actually kicked me out. I'm 16 years old, and I've just left school, and then bang, I'm in a gang of bricklayers from Hawley, like working with them. And that they are different people to the Brethren, and I have fond memories, but they're pretty wild, some of those guys. I just went, oh yeah, I'll be a bricklayer, Dad. He said, oh, do you thought about being a plumber or glazer? No, my friend was going to be a bricklayer, so I just chose bricklayer because I didn't do well at school, whereas both my brothers excelled in mathematics and English. But so all of a sudden I'm on a bricklaying site with a load of lads, and you know what, we're back in 1986, 87, and it's a lot. It was pub culture, you know. It was like, and I was up for it. You know, you go out and have some great times, and think, you know. And I really, you know, I really got into the music scene, I must admit. I travel all over the place to see bands and things. Fell in love with music, for sure. And it was just always gobsmacked. Like, yeah, you remember having, just, why, what is it? What is it? Like God and the Brethren banning this music and God and, kind of bit. So I was thinking about it, and making myself ill about it, I suppose, as a young guy who didn't really know much. But,
And in that time frame at all, did you see your mother at all in those teen years?
Oh, I was living with her. I left the Brethren and went to live with my mum.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought you were with your dad for that time frame.
No.
Or were you going between the two?
Sorry, what I've done, because I knew I'd do this. You can't stick
Right.
around more. I wasn't. We've got to keep it structured.
No, it's fine.
But what it is, I lived with my dad from age 11, because I thought I was going to talk more, tell loads and loads more stories about, but you tend to flip forward.
Fine.
11 to 16 in the Brethren.
Right.
A lot happened.
Yeah.
I did just flip forward there.
Yeah.
But a lot happened in those 4 years. I didn't want to get too slow, but and I always treated the place like a hotel. I didn't, and I wasn't scared about being kicked out either. What actually happened was I just carried on, and I there was, when you talk about it, I don't know what it's like in other, but in London and places like that, like, it didn't seem like it was as much fun as where I lived in Croydon and Reigate. As in, there was quite a youngster scene, and the kids weren't too heavy. Because some of those Brethren children are seriously Bibled out, aren't they? They're really, like, just good. I don't know what it is, but they're not allowed to do it. They can't go out. They can't do anything. They can't go down to the cinema. They can't listen to their dad. I suppose I'm talking about it. I'm pleased that I had a rebellious kind of, but my rebelliousness has brought me problems. That's all. It has brought me problems. Like I say, happy ending, but it is. I had that my rebellion that. So quite. Where do we go from there? I've done some. It's quite a big thing for your dad to take you into a religion and take you to church and introduce you to your mum's parents. That was odd. And introduced me to, like, her brothers, and I didn't sort of think it was kind of like this. Quite, I don't know. We join the Brethren, and we go to, and we stay with them. And this is and then when we go back, after staying with them, and I just go and see my mum and say, Mum, I just spent 3 days with your two brothers and your dad and your mum.
And your mum never saw them. She wasn't allowed to.
No. Well, she had. The thing is, my mum had made she was quite strong in many ways. And when she left, and she didn't show me much emotion. She didn't cry to me about how much she loved her dad or anything. Yeah. She did, some people are very, she kind of left them behind, I think. And not like she didn't care about them. I think she cared about them. But she owned up to me.
But it may have been a way of coping. It may have been her way of coping, because she knew that when she left.
She said to me, she thought her mum was stupid.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they definitely didn't have a fantastic relationship. She never. She didn't really slate her or anything. She just sort of said she didn't do anything. She just sort of kind of whinged a bit or something.
Yeah.
And she waffled on about her dad that much, really. Her dad was quite a cheerful guy. Noddy, I believe, his nickname. He was quite a cheerful soul. They were come across as a bit little less Victorian than my dad's side of the family. They were quite a Victorian bunch.
Right.
But yeah, what damage to Brethren do, I suppose, you know, I can say, I think you can overdo God. I don't like it when, I don't like to, like Christians, I don't like to challenge Christians. I've no interest in challenging Christians. I'd rather not get involved, and you know, but for me, I found the whole the seriousness of the God and their scriptures and their hells and I found that obviously like. I think I suffered from a kind of religious trauma anyway through my actions as well. Definitely.
Yeah, and also religion can become almost an addiction. I know somebody gave me a book that's called When God Becomes a Drug.
Yeah, right.
So it can, I mean, to be honest, I've still got to read the book. I haven't dipped into it yet, but it goes into how, you know, religion can become an addiction almost.
Well, that makes sense. It's like, where are we? Sorry.
Sorry,
like, no, you're not. You're making complete sense. But like, for me especially, I mean, I don't know how the other and some kids would read the ministry as kids. You know, I never read one. I don't think I can't remember one meeting really, as such, because you'd just be looking around. And it was, but yeah, other points. I've got some minutes here. Other points as far as joining the Brethren. One thing that hadn't happened in my life before. I'd never been around babies before, and all of a sudden you're getting to know all these children and babies. And that's actually quite nice. So you know, you're like, look at that little baby. She's getting really cute now, and look, you know, they get really toddlers. They're no longer babies, and someone might hand you a baby or whatever at a break or whatever, and you'd go around breaks and play guitar. Oh, and they'd give you a beer. That was another thing. I was quite impressed when I joined the Brethren. You know, they are 11, and you go and sit down in someone's house, and they say, "Would you like a beer?" And I say, "Yeah, I'll have a beer." So they give you a cold beer, like that. Yeah.
I don't know how it was in your day, Dean, but I know when I was growing up around about that age, they were always strong. Most places it was a strong beer, you know, like a Tennant Super or a Carlsberg Special Brew or something like that.
Yeah, they were into their beer. They were into their. I mean, there was quite a few more. I suppose that's what I liked about my existence there. In those few years, there was a rebellious nature to a lot of them, and it's funny, isn't it? Like they didn't have, because it's all the way back there in the 80s. I mean, these two guys, these two twins from Reigate, the Douglas twins, they bought taxis, and used to hack about in their taxis, and we had fun. You know, we were skidding up the road. I mean, if you did that now, you went round some private cul-de-sac roads or private roads with a taxi, like sledging all around the place. I don't think you get away with it these days. But yeah, pretty crazy like that, weren't they? You know, but yeah, let's get out and hack our cars, or you know, listen to music. That was the one that always really fascinated me. Like you can't listen to this music. That was the one that kind of, because
So for you, that was a real sticking point, because the Brethren were very, I mean, I remember the era of the late 70s, early 80s, and there was this big thing about pre-recorded music. You could play a guitar and sing, but listening to pre-recorded music, so to listen, as you say, to the original, was just the biggest sin.
Oh, yes. And that's exactly where like, I never really questioned how wrong this might be. You're in with these guys, you're in with this religion, and there's hundreds of them, and you've just been introduced to your mum's family. And well, my mum would always like meet members of my dad's family, but never her own. Just because I think what with me, You know, my dad's mum, when I was, my grandmother, she left me quite a lot of money actually. And the funny thing was, is it happened just my friend of mine was going to Canada, and my dad's mum left me £15,000, and I just was thinking about this Canada trip, and then all of a sudden it's completely affordable. That was nice. And I went to Canada, and I went to Toronto. So my friends were playing folk festivals over there. They were in the folk festival set. So I went to Toronto. There was something. I went to the Winnipeg Folk Festival. Met some friends there. Oh no, I've got to tell you about the flight. Yeah, tell you a good story. I got a flight from Toronto to Winnipeg, and the plane was empty, and there was just about 10 massive black guys all in one area of the plane. So I go down looking at my ticket, and see my seat, and it's this massive guy, and he's actually in my seat, and I know there's loads of other seats, so I went over and I said, anyway, it turned out they were a Miami gospel band, and the guy that was in my seat was blind, actually blind, and massive and huge. And they were lovely, and they were playing this place that I was going to. Lovely people. They were cool, New Orleans type gospel. I love gospel music, you know. I love that stuff. And funnily enough, so does my son, with his drumming, and he loved it when he was a kid, and he Googled gospel drummers and stuff. So that was really nice. That was an experience. That was a nice thing to happen. So yeah, and ended up in Winnipeg. I remember thinking, this is Mr. Simon's and blah. Canada's a wonderful place. Crumbs, that's a really nice place to go to. Definitely. I ended up in Vancouver. I went twice actually with her money. I went back 2 years later and went to Whitehorse, up into the by Dawson City. Did music parties there. Just went to them. Didn't like my music. I certainly wasn't a player. Well, I went along and experienced something different there. Where in Dawson City there was an hour of twilight before the 23 hours of sunlight. Fantastic place to be. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I've been seeing my dad a couple of times, and he's very. And my brothers. We could talk about the review. They turned up out of the blue. I think my mum refused. I think she did chat to one of them, and she was like, I don't know what all that was about. My brother came around to see me, and I just didn't know what all that was about, really. They were kind of saying, I don't know if they were saying you're sorry or we've forgiven you, or you're okay.
So that would have been quite a few years after. So you left at 16, and you were with your and then presumably you didn't see your father and your brothers for a good few years then.
For many years. No, not for a long time actually. Well, it wasn't that long. Well, I had the mental illness episode really scarred my younger life. It was it really did get hold of me. It was a psychiatric thing, and it was like, coming up anointed, I was talking to God, blah blah blah. The whole thing ends up in a lot of paranoia, a lot of panic attacks, a lot of really not being very well at all, really. That's the nature of what happened to me. But I'm pleased to say that after a couple of years, I got on the better end of it, and I've gotten all right in life with a lot of help,
So how did you work that through? Do you think that was, if you like, it's probably simplifies it, but a reaction to that change at 11 years old and the pressure?
I think I did take God and religion quite seriously. I don't like to come out and say, I can't be bothered to sort of say I don't believe in anything. Only because I don't like saying it, not because it's just like, if you don't, at least sort of have make it, turn it into a science fiction novel at least. But it's pretty dry what they're doing in there, isn't it? It's not like, what can you say? It's like holy. I've had a lot of fun. I've been seeing a lot of good music. I've been to wonderful festivals, met some wonderful people, and although that can be like sometimes you're dicing, with like drinking too much or whatever. Like go to Bristol. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't be fit. I think being fearful, being. You got to try and behave yourself, haven't you? No, we all know that. But...
You can attempt. Yeah. So
it's been fun. It's been fun.
It's been fun. Yeah. Once you kind of got yourself better and got on an even keel.
Yeah, I did get myself better slowly but surely.
With help, I'm sure. And you had your mum.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I think I really scared her. One thing I struggled with, I did really scare her. Actually, at that time, it was, started getting quite out of hand mentally, really, So it was a struggle, and I think it was a form of religious trauma. So,
or maybe
some people, I took it all, but perhaps I took it all to heart. And if you think about what they're talking about, it's quite. And unless if you don't stay there, you leave all these people, and no one else gives a monkeys what these people are saying. But you've had quite a few years of it in your childhood, I suppose. I think that's what it was,
Yeah. And I also think with your story, which is quite interesting. So Gilly and Ross and I were all born into it, and we knew no different. We that was it. That was our life up until we left. Whereas you had a life that was, I suppose, what most people just think is a normal childhood life, mixing with kids, eating with kids, going to, and so on.
Yeah.
And then suddenly that was sort of clamped down on, and you had.
But more to the point, these people were just saying, like, come, be with us, come with us. But obviously they wanted to make the decision. I had to cut off ties with my mum, which was something I wasn't going to do. I knew that I wasn't going to do. And I started refusing to get up for the supper.
Yeah.
That wasn't making any sense to me. I think I missed it for the last 10 weeks or something. My dad didn't have he wasn't getting me out of bed to go to that,
And did your father remarry when you went back into the Brethren?
Eventually, yeah.
Because that's quite unusual, isn't it?
I didn't know. It never happened when I was in there.
So it was after you'd left from.
Oh yeah. Well, I left. I think Kevin was starting to hang around in the car park with the girl he eventually married. My brother Kevin. When Andrew got married a little bit later on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the review, which was sort of early 2003, something like that, wasn't it? Where a lot of us that had left got visits from family. What happened to you with your father and brothers at that point then?
My brother gave me a big brick wall to build.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was quite a big job actually. And Kevin, didn't see much around here. No, I did a load of brickwork for my dad. He had a bungalow, and I hadn't even put this in my notes. The review at that time. Yeah, we obviously hadn't had much to do with each other. I'd been through the really unwell stage of my life, pushed on through that, and got to the review, and I hadn't really found a great deal of direction in life, in a way. But let me carry on. All of a sudden, Andrew, I think it was, turned up. He was coming around, and I had a friend round, and we were drinking, and just having some beers. And I can remember one friend that was there, and my friend, he had a big birthmark on his face, and he looked quite He wasn't a menacing guy at all. Really, if you looked at him, he had this great big red birthmark across his face. And he was my friend. Builder and that. So I came round and we were having a beer, and I said, "Oh, come in then." It didn't hang around for long, but I can remember just kind of talking to them. And Andrew, my brother Andrew, is very stiff. He's kind of like,
Yeah.
you're not getting much out of him.
Right.
But he's kind of like letting them know that you're all right, you've been forgiven, sort of thing, almost like with. Like, I wasn't having much of that. I weren't rude to him by any means. But through that, my dad, I did quite a lot of brickwork for my dad on his house. And then I did quite a lot of brickwork for Kevin. But I remember Kevin, when me and Kevin were kids, we were close kids. And then we got a bit older and he had his friends. But we were definitely close. And Kevin was closer to my mum. I think my mum would have liked it if he had not gone to the bedroom, but he did, because Kevin liked running and we did the running clubs, and I didn't get the impression Kevin was particularly, but he was, he stayed. And where have I gone? I've just drifted off. I was talking about Kevin.
You're talking about the review, and perhaps
that's right.
Yeah.
So
if I could just explain, Dean, for the people who perhaps, I know it has been explained before, but we all know what the review is. But basically, it was when I think it was Gilly, you were both in at this time, weren't you? So Bruce Hales said something about contacting, and maybe one of you could just explain a bit better, because I wasn't in at that time, what the review involved for people that don't know.
So it was essentially, Bruce Hales, his father, John Hales, had passed away in 2001, I think. And had kind of been, I suppose there'd been a kind of a regime sort of that had operated for years under John Hales, and had sort of been, I guess every locality had their so the top dogs who had just sort of run things unchallenged, and obviously had dealt with people a lot in a lot of cases very harshly, and there was cases where
stories, isn't there? I mean, that's the thing. It's just to most people who tell them these stories, and they're just like, crumbs, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember a story of he's a lot older than me, but of a lad who was he would have been a lad at that time, and he was 16, and he was kicked out of his parents' house and had to live in his, in his car and stuff like that. So there was a lot of stuff like that had gone on over the years, and I think when Bruce Hales came to the fore, he was kind of, I guess, trying to. Well, I suppose looking back on it, it was probably a bit of the PR campaign starting to try and make things look better, and apologise for misdemeanours that had happened under the old regime, and I think probably, Ross, you probably remember it, but at that time there was, I think, because there was that thing of going back over stuff that was wrong. I guess a lot of the peeps had sort of almost started to swing the other way, I guess.
I was going to say, around that time, things started to become almost quite free and easy, and you were allowed to sort of like get away with things that you probably wouldn't have done before. Is that what you remember, Gilly?
Yeah, and it certainly became then. It sort of then became like this, like you say, this free and easy stage, and there was a lot of stuff that the Brethren hadn't done previously, and people were wearing stuff that people were wearing to the meeting had never, people wearing denim and stuff to the meetings, which had been banned for years.
And another thing, I know in Peterborough around about that time, things were so different. Sorry, Dean.
I just remember like Reigate and Red Hill being a bit rebellious, as in a lot of people would tart themselves up a bit, It's not really what they wanted, was it? It's not what they wanted. They kind of like don't make yourself don't wear a flashy shirt, don't wear a nice pair of shoes. not really what we're all about. You know what I mean?
And also around
But
about that time,
people did it, you know.
yeah. And also around about that time in Peterborough, I can remember that I think some ministry had come out that had said it didn't matter where you sat in the meeting. Obviously, the sisters would still have to sit behind the brothers. But I know in Peterborough, us young ones always used to try and get to the meeting really early so we could go down on the front row and sit on the front row so that all the usual ones.
Just to have the equilibrium.
But the upshot of all that was
the front row thing did. I mean, I never learned about that, but the front row thing did kind of make me laugh. As in, what was it? An unwritten rule. You can sit where you like, but if you sit in the front row.
Yeah, so we that's what we did. We were early, so we could all sit on the front row and push all the others onto the second and third row.
The second row, yeah.
But then, just after the review, Bruce Hales clamped right down, and that was obviously his intention all the way along.
The upshot of that was, I think probably the same for you, Dean, is that those of us that were out at that time suddenly got visits from family we hadn't seen for donkey's years, and that in itself was. Yeah, you got that, Dean. Was quite traumatic in itself.
I mean, my mum had. Sure, she did. We didn't see anyone together, but she did just get a visit. But I don't think she got a visit from either Andrew or Kevin. I think she had something like Charles, a couple of other brothers or whatever, like pop round to see her, like not Andrew or Kevin. So, because it did kind of get brushed aside a bit, that, because I remember I didn't realise at the time it was such a big deal. I just thought, why are the brethren coming to talk to me? Or why is my brother coming? Because my brother came to talk to me. I can't remember who it was, who he was with now. And we had quite I got to remember my mum passed 8 years ago. And obviously that was a traumatic thing. Obviously cancer is a very traumatic thing. But she fought it well, and we had some great times. When it did take her in the end, and you kind of like all over the place and whatnot. And I had, my son, my son was very close to her. So when we're going to see her funeral, up at the funeral, and we came outside, and there was my brother Andrew and my brother Kevin, and Charles Dunn, I think, Charles Gurr, and they were behind the fence, and they were off church land, and they're looking in. My brother Kevin was the only one visibly upset, but yeah, they wouldn't. So when a coffin came out, they would wait. But they wouldn't stand on the church land. I mean, this is bizarre for anyone.
So they came to the funeral. They came to your mum's.
They came to my mum's funeral. Didn't even stand on the church ground. Right.
Wow. So they stood outside on the pavement.
Outside, behind the fence, looking in. And I hadn't really seen any of Andrew and Kevin for a long time, and.
Yeah,
I didn't find Kevin a great talker, but he was really upset with Kevin. He was like, I wasn't crying, He was, which is odd because I've just been to my mum's funeral and she died sort of 6 or 7 days ago, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And also my brother's standing behind a fence and not mixing with any of us, like really upset, which is fair. I mean, he was the one that, he loved my mum, I'm sure he did, but he did just do the brethren thing, and that was that.
That, in a way, that's a really interesting insight, because one thing that's come out of these chats with a few ex-brethren is that there's a lot of hurt caused for us that leave and lose family, but there's also a lot of hurt for those inside. And I know, and I'm thinking of your brother Kevin. He lost his mum.
I certainly didn't think bad. I was more shocked. I think I was myself. It was like to see my brother there crying, and I'm not feeling that emotion right now. But I'd done the whole ceremony and all the build up, I played a song in there, and you know, and I came out, and then I was really quite shocked. Not shocked, but I was shocked. My two brothers. Not only that, there's a lot of guests as well, and you know, all of a sudden, like it's going like that's, and a lot of those guests are sort of people that know my brother and remember him from when we were younger, you know.
Yeah.
And they've walked around the outside of the church, and they haven't. And they stayed the other side of the fence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was bizarre.
But I suppose your brother Kevin wouldn't have. I mean, if you lose somebody very dear to you, normally, although it's terribly sad, you can have happy memories at times, and you said you had some good times with your mum, whereas your brother wouldn't have that, would he?
Yeah, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't know how he felt. I'm guessing, but
I mean, he was very close to my mum as a young boy.
Yeah.
But just didn't. Obviously, was close enough to Dad to take my dad's path on hand.
Yeah.
But he got married pretty quick as well. I think he did quite. You say did quite well. He had a big family and lives in a whopping great big house. So I hope they've had a wonderful life. You know, because it's fun. Another thing, although the brethren, they were kind of considered weirdos or whatnot by the world or by the people I like school friends. You know, I wouldn't tell them about my association with the brethren, for instance. But I mean, there's something about, you know, when you get. I can remember sitting in like the amphitheatre, what it was, and I could, before I left, I can remember looking at every person and knowing every single one of their names. Now, in a meet of Reigate and Croydon, I think that was around about 500 people. I think so. And I remember thinking, know her name, know her name, know her name, know her name, know her name. I mean, it's just like unheard of now. But it's amazing. Like, so when I'm talking about the religious trauma, when they take you, they took me to this place and like where you go to church and all those breaks and all those dinners when you're that age, like 11, 16, all those sort of times, and you know, some people were better than others. I can remember people like the Douglas family, you know. I used to, and then you had to go home for lunch as well. I'd never done that before, obviously. And we used to go to a lovely house and have lunch, me and Glenn Dunn and Will Dunn and a few others. And they were very happy memories, actually. You know, that kind of, you know, the Mrs. Douglas with her headscarf on, pulling out a baked tray of fish fingers and chips for a load of 12, 13-year-olds. You know, it's good. The brethren definitely had something. You know, I mean, that was in that kind of world, that sort of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that would.
Because obviously they're quite wealthy as well. I mean, a lot of my friends from school lived in the council estate around the corner. You know, no detached house there. Some of my, I had a bit of both actually. You know, when you're young, you make, well, if you're worldly like I was, and I was pretty well. I was more worldly than my brothers. I was more of a free spirit, as in I got home, I went out on my bike. You know, I pinched my dad's money because I was, and things like that. I was naughty, you know, and I was a pretty free spirit as a youngster for sure. And my dad, and their problems enabled that to be possibly freer than it should have been. Maybe, I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, I could come home at 9 o'clock at night, dark as quite a young kid, and I'd come in and Mum would be in and Dad would still be in the attic tapping away on his accounts, you know, things like that. Which is, you know, I can only kind of look back in fondness about it in a way, but it's such a different ideal actually to what, you know, then my dad, he takes you to a place where the world is nothing like that, you know. I sometimes wonder what the ideal actually is all meant to be about, because like that family thing, that sort of coming home for lunch and did they all do that? Did they? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, when you were talking about the breaks.
Well, I took also kids going around brethren houses at lunchtime for dinner and the breaks, and the general entertainment, the entertainment regime, and a lot of those guys actually, when you think back, comes us in a really nice house then, you know. A lot of them had these big houses and things, didn't they? You know.
But the break you're talking about, would that have been in the 80s?
Sorry?
The breaks you're talking about, would that have been in the 80s?
Oh, yeah, well, I was only in the 80s from about...
Yeah, because I was going to say...
From about 82 to 86.
Okay.
81.
Yeah, because
all the time I spent.
I remember it in there in the 80s, and the breaks they were just like big meals, but you know, it was all sorts of stuff.
With an asterisk book. You must have asterisks.
Yeah, but nowadays,
yes, Dean, I remember asterisks very well.
You have an asterisk book and you have a cold beer and you're 12, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of, it depends on where you went.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
nowadays, the breaks and meals have totally changed. You know, everything has to be the best, and everybody outdoing each other. It's you know, it's not like, I don't know. It's not. I remember it not being anything like it was back in the 80s. It was far more free and easy in the 80s.
Yeah, and to me,
I mean, I've heard some stories I don't remember, or sides of the brethren I don't remember. Was that kind of. But then again, I don't think I was old enough to pick up on it, and I'm not sure if it was. But I've heard that, like, you know, if you I thought I wasn't quite sure how it worked, but you could be poor in the brethren, you could be wealthy in the brethren. I take it, you know.
Yeah, I think
I'm not sure where my dad was exactly.
I mean, I was in the brethren. I left in the mid 80s, and it was. I think I haven't been in it, but I think the big difference was then nobody was particularly judged by the house they lived in, and there were brethren that lived in very nice big detached houses, and there were brethren that lived in terraced houses. The only thing that was not allowed was a flat because of the shared. You know, having to share the ground rent. Thank you, Ross. But apart from that, and when people were marrying then, you know, their first home would be a mid-terrace to a normal, what we would present normal first home, because that's what they could afford. And that seems to have totally changed now.
Well, it depends on how like there's some wealth in there, but I didn't get the impression everyone was rich.
No, and I don't think it was money orientated in the way perhaps what Gillies described his memories of the brethren, leaving much more recently, and Ross as well. I don't think in the late 70s, 80s it was all about the money.
No,
and in fact,
but that seems to be perhaps what it's more about these days.
Yeah.
Because back in the 70s, like Jackie's saying, back in the 80s, you know, whether you're poor or whether you're rich, if you're poor, you just afforded what you could for the breaks. If you're rich, obviously you could have really nice food. But nowadays, you know, even if you're poor, you give everybody the best of everything.
Sorry, I'm just saying, like Christianity, what exactly is it? What's it meant to be? Yeah.
It's not supposed to be about money, I thought, but anyway,
exactly.
I didn't think it particularly mattered.
But it's interesting that there is a big. I know it's when I go on the pages and things that a lot of it about how rich the Haleses are. And is it right that they're wanting money, more money off their flock? Is that fair to say?
No, I mean, I've said this before, but it's basically just become a business now. It's not a church anymore.
One of the Hales owns Ox Tools. They're big, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's one of the Hales' sons, isn't it? Owns that business. But I think, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think back to my time in the Brethren. And there were definitely issues there. There was a huge issue with families being split up. There was a huge issue with probably what you'd describe as religious pressure. I mean, my father nearly had a nervous breakdown, and that's part of the reason why we left, just because of that religious, pressure. But money didn't seem to be a thing in the way it was now. And also what you did for work, I think in that era, there was a big emphasis on, certainly for my two older brothers, you learn a trade. You know, that was it. You learn a trade and you go and work in a trade. Whereas now it's all about sales and making money, isn't it?
It became very untrade-like, though, didn't it? There was all sorts of restrictions on what you could do, like for work and like academies or whatever you could join. And they kind of stripped everyone of an education, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone of you know, you could before Mr. Jim, shall we say, you had a chance of studying something, you know, becoming like a physicist or anyway something.
But you had a chance of doing what suited your personality.
But they did actually take pretty much that deal away. You don't go to university.
Yeah, my mum was one of the last ones to go to university in our locality. She became an English teacher. Yeah. So, and she managed to get in just before it came in that you wouldn't go.
Yeah.
What did she get? As in, what did she finish university?
She was at Bristol University, so she studied English and she got a BA Honours in English, a Bachelor of Arts, and became an English teacher for a few years.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it?
Way of you becoming a teacher in the Brethren. Once you can't go to university, I suppose. Apart from work for, you know, I don't really see. Yeah,
but it wasn't just, you know, not everybody's cut out for going to university, you know, whether you're in the Brethren or not, that's just life. But it wasn't just that, because I can remember if somebody had said to me, what did I want to do for work, like they do, my biggest desire would have been to have been a nurse, a general nurse. Right. But that would never, ever have been allowed. That didn't, at the time, you would have got a job in a hospital and you'd have trained on that would never have been allowed in the Brethren. Never. You know. Yeah. And I remember asking my brother in the Brethren, you know, why would it, to me, it's a reasonably worthy profession. And the reply I got, well, you know, doing something like being a nurse wouldn't be compatible with the Brethren lifestyle. And that was the reply.
We're just talking our language too.
They do, don't they? Yeah, they do.
They will just waffle.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. They can't. They cannot be filmed, can they? They're, by an intelligent. I mean, imagine them trying to take their argument onto a mainstream setting. I don't know.
We'd be more than happy.
They haven't got people skilled that could. They just wouldn't know what was coming next, would they?
No, but I mean, put it this way: if they went on to Good Morning Britain or something like that, the interviewers rip them to shreds.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe we should suggest they start gently by coming on the Get a Life podcast. We'll be kind.
They would not get somebody like Crumbish. Yeah, you have to. Some people go out and learn that stuff, don't they? Yeah, you're going to get verbally attacked.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said, Jackie, about, you know, came in at one time about everybody learning a trade. I know in the 80s there was plumbers, bricklayers, carpenters, electricians, and all that in our locality. And obviously when it came in that you'd work for a business, those people really, really struggled.
I bet. Yeah, I bet they did, because suddenly what they've been doing and how they've been earning their living, and probably quite happily earning it, wasn't acceptable all of a sudden, I guess.
No. Yeah. And of course, because they're practical people, they struggled in the sales role.
Yeah. I mean, I often think of my brother, who is an electrician, and he still is an electrician in the Brethren, and I feel quite pleased that he hasn't had to, you know, for some reason he hasn't had to do exactly what you've just said, Ross, and give up something he's probably very good at to take on a sales role that wouldn't be suited to him at all, I guess. So, yeah.
So there basically are quite a few big boys in the Brethren with big companies, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But somehow they learned that. They must be good at that. Because my brother, he ended up working for quite a big company. I couldn't get much out of him when I spoke to him, but I know he worked for a big blind company doing blinds in the city. I remember thinking, there could be some money in that. And I think he was something to do with the Douglases, Andy Douglas maybe. And he said they did Kensington Palace. They did all the blinds in Kensington Palace, and my brother was manager. He was bright, my brother. They're both bright.
It's also interesting, isn't it? Because the impression I get, and again, Ross and Gilly having left much more recently than I have, if you're in business and your business does well, it's perceived as God is blessing you. And
this is.
I mean, it's like, if you know. You know, and what happens if a business doesn't do so well in the brethren? You know,
if a business doesn't do so well, it gets taken over by UBT, basically. Or
is that what happens?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's what happened when I was in there. I don't know about. Does that happen when you were in there, Gilly? Or
so what's
there was.
Sorry. You carry on for 1 second.
No, I was just going to say there was a lot of businesses that were merged conveniently because they were basically hitting rock bottom and needed someone else to rescue them.
Yeah.
But I do remember coming back to your point, Jackie, about like businesses doing well. I remember hearing one case of where somebody had got a business and they took the advice that was given to them by higher up in the Peebs, and the business took a downturn, and the response from higher up was that, okay, you may have taken the advice on, but you obviously didn't believe it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just anybody with a logical brain will look at that and go, no, the reason it failed was because the advice wasn't right. Not because you didn't believe in the advice.
Well, it's sort of the being blessed can sometimes be a little bit selective, can't it? And what does it mean anyway?
It's quite an awful thing to say to someone in a way. That's what in Christianity or whatever. But I mean, I smashed my elbow. I compound fracture the other day. I fell off the steps in the garden. Never had an accident I haven't had an accident like that. I smashed my elbow. It's compound fracture. Went to hospital. Amazing how quickly it kind of healed. When I say quickly it healed, and also how slowly it healed as well. It was tough. It was a proper break, and they put me back together, and the steps collapsed on me. You know what I mean? And I can't say it didn't cross my mind that.
Did you think it was God's judgment?
Maybe I deserved it. I don't know.
It's part of how we've been taught, isn't it? It's part of how we've been taught. If it goes wrong, it's God's judgment. If it goes right, it's God's blessings. But hey, I don't think life's quite that cut and dried, is it? Yeah. No, sure. Anyway, Dean, it's actually been quite fascinating talking to you because it's a very different perspective about how you had the childhood that was relatively worldly and normal, and then you got taken into it, and and the effect it had on you is quite significant.
It took me balmy for a while. When I left the Brethren, I remember listening to the music, and I was really cool for a while, and I meeting I'd left the Brethren and all the people wearing cool clothes and listening to music, and I got myself in a muddle through being, cannabis and LSD, pretty much. Can't put it down to much more than that. Oh, I thought it was so cool when I was young, Now I can see what happened, and it's hard to explain to other people, but it's,
looking back and reflecting on it and why that might have triggered that kind of, Well, Dean, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a laugh in places. It's been a laugh.
So
Yes.
You know,
80%.
every
I found me too.
this would take 1.5 minutes. It's that every good meeting when I was young
Yeah.
had a let me get this. Had a hymn in it, didn't it?
Yeah.
And I just want to say goodbye to anyone who's listening to this podcast. Just with a bit of music. So yeah,
That's fantastic.
play me out for 1 minute. If you just play me out for 1 minute, that's it. Thank you very much for talking to me.
You can have your minute of music.
Can you hear that?
We can.
We can, yeah.
Anyway, take care. Thank you very
Dean,
much.
thank you.
If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.